One concept that has shaped how I think about money and how I spend my time is the concept that I call value-based budgeting. It's my own personal term that puts a label to the idea that I'll describe to you in this video. How would I explain this? We as a human society have dramatically improved the standard of living for virtually everyone across the globe. For example, let's look at 1820. 75% of the world lived in extreme poverty at that time, meaning they couldn't afford the bare necessities for good health and shelter. Today, you know what that number is? It's about 8%. Now, that's not to make light of what still has to be done. There are areas of the world where abject poverty is still like in the 40% of the population. But as a whole, when you step back and you look at the direction the world has taken, we have made some extraordinary progress, more than anyone would have dared to dream just even 100 years ago. Going from 75% to 8% in about 200 years is almost miraculous. Our ability to survive and thrive is unlike anything it's ever been before. So let's take a look at us personally. Let's just take an average situation. If you work a 40-hour work week, think about this. There are 168 hours in a week. If you get enough sleep at, let's say, 8 hours a night, you sleep 56 of those hours. You work 40 of those hours. So your remaining hours equal 168 minus 56 minus 40. That comes to 72 hours. 72 hours a week, which is equal to 180% of the time that you spend working. If you only sleep 7 hours a night, then that number of free time outside of work is nearly 200% of the time spent working. And that's not to mention the fact that there are also 11 federal holidays in the US, and most people with a salary get at least 10 days of paid time off. So, if we look at the picture as a whole, that means there are at least 125 days that we are not working at our place of employment during the year. Of the days we do work, we only spend half of our waking hours actually at work. So in hours, that comes out to 2,000 plus 1,920 for a total of 3,920 hours of waking free time for ourselves. 1,920 hours of work at our employment. What this means is we spend only 1/3 of our waking hours working. The other 2/3 of our waking hours are spent away from work, whether for free time or other daily chores that we have to accomplish. So think about this. We as a world have brought extreme poverty levels down from 75% of the world in 1820 to 8% of the world today. And we managed to accomplish this by only working 1/3 of our waking hours. So what we make with 1/3 of our time, we can use to fund 100% of our time. Now you may be wondering where I'm going with this. Well, I'm going to give a bit of a twist here, because surprisingly the improvement in standard of living has not coincided with an increase in overall happiness. If you measure, for example, the rate of depression or mental health issues over the years. It's a bit strange, isn't it? Because that sort of goes against the assumption that what we really want as humans is a lot of money and stuff. Let's say homes and cars, the ability to buy or do whatever we want. Now, obviously, going from abject poverty to having enough to live healthily and safely does, of course, improve happiness. It generally does. But having more than that, gaining all the bells and whistles that come from more than enough, does not necessarily improve happiness, at least not on its own. It has to be accompanied by something else, something that we may have overlooked to our own detriment. We live in a society that operates in a really phenomenal way. Each individual looks out for their own interests by determining what is the most valuable way they can serve the needs of others in the most efficient and effective way possible. And that effort is rewarded with money, the power to do and the power to buy. But it comes at a cost if we're not prepared to watch out for it. Greed and fear are among the most powerful negative emotions that humans face. The problem with money is that the thought of not having enough, of losing it, or of having to spend more energy to accumulate it invokes fear in those who value comfort and consistency. And the brother of fear is greed. That is, when we see someone else apparently succeeding or gaining ground ahead of us or doing something we wish we could do, we immediately are faced with the desire to do whatever it takes to either one, appear as good as that other person, or two, actually acquire what that other person has. These two forces drive us to keep running the race, doing the same thing we did yesterday, always pushing forward to gain just a little bit more, with less and less regard to the actual cost to our lives. And that keeps us in something like an almost hypnotic state, one which will not be changed because we cannot see beyond the fear and greed until we overcome those two factors through both an internal change, through renewal of the mind, and an outward change, taking actual action in the direction of the deeper wealth, which is purpose along with time and flexibility and others. Money is measurable. Money is comparable. Someone can say they have more money than someone else. Someone can say they have a big house, a nice car, maybe by comparison. They took an extravagant vacation. They send their kids to a nicer school. They have better things. But measuring wealth by purpose is much more abstract. Measuring the feeling that you have every day when you do your work, the rest that you're able to get at night, the ability to disconnect from the day's work and be present with your loved ones during your time off. These things are almost impossible to measure with a number. And because they're impossible to measure, they're not a popular way to compare oneself with others. It's not something that feeds the ego in the same way that money can and does. And so money, if not put in its proper perspective, can become like an addiction, whether someone has a little or a lot. And the love of it, the pursuit of it for its own sake, can become a prison. And then we wonder why people are not happier because they have greater comforts, luxuries, experiences, toys, things. Because these things are ancillary to the true wealth. They're part of wealth. They're even part of happiness. But by themselves, they have no power to produce it. It's to the invisible things that we must look: time, flexibility, and most of all, a sense of purpose. So going all the way back to what I mentioned at the beginning, I said I believe in value-based budgeting. What is that? I've laid the foundation. Here's the answer. Value-based budgeting is being intentional about where you spend money and where you save money so that you don't give up those things which are critical to your well-being in mind, body, and spirit. And for the things you do give up, you choose to either use an alternative, maybe learn to do a certain service yourself, or you simply find a different way to meet that need or desire. Because the danger of budgeting too tightly is that you can end up in one of two places on a very slippery slope. You can reinforce in your mind that I can't afford this and psychologically develop a poor man's view of the world. Or you can become desperate for release from such constrictions and end up taking too much risk, hoping to strike it rich overnight. And it ends up keeping you right where you are, if not setting you back by loss. So budgeting must be done in such a way that it's not simply about cutting your costs. It's about cutting the right types of costs, so you strike a balance of marginal utility. What is marginal utility? I apply this to a personal situation, but here's the definition by Alfred Marshall, who described it in his book written in 1890, titled Principles of Economics. He says, the additional benefit a person derives from a given increase of his stock of a thing diminishes with every increase in the stock that he already has. Utility can refer to happiness gained from something, the satisfaction from acquiring it. So think of it like when you're maybe craving something sweet. We'll use this as an example. Your first bite of that chocolate cake is far more satisfying and improving of your happiness than, say, the 10th bite. It's the same way for almost anything, at least material wealth or services that can be imagined. But so often we don't exactly know what is truly driving our desire for this or that. So we go to the last thing that we remember satisfied the desire, or at least masked it, when in fact there's a deeper, more profound, more transformative answer to those desires than is obvious at first glance. And so some of us go our whole lives thinking that we live in the age of information, and surely nothing of serious importance escapes our notice because we can get an answer at any moment that we think of the question, just at the click of a button. But the easy access to information also helps to keep us off our guard to the things which we might be missing right in front of our eyes, right under our noses, because we may have become too relaxed with the idea that if there were something to be seen, we would have seen it already, or at least AI might have told us. Wrong. In the information age especially, I think we have become too dependent on machines and the system to tell us what to do, who we are, what to think, what we might become. Add to that the power of greed and fear to drive us to run a race that may not actually be worth running, and we find ourselves in the midst of a matrix that cannot be escaped except through a kind of internal revelation to step outside our normal daily activities and truly search deep within ourselves what is worthy of our attention. In the next video, I'll discuss a bit more on how this plays into budgeting, but for now, suffice it to say that I believe we can live a very abundant life, replete with time, flexibility, purpose, and plenty of money if we will place our focus on balancing true wealth and overcoming our own temptations to act based on greed and fear. Just like investing helps to send capital to the most effective providers of value, so value-based budgeting helps us spend our money on just those things which do improve our lives substantially while not robbing us of the other elements of the invisible wealth. Bring this mindset to the budgeting table, and you can structure your life to be balanced in every aspect of well-being, and this can set you up for regular progress toward ever greater horizons.